You know what they say about revenge being a dish best served cold? Well, mine came with a side of punctured tires and a lawsuit that'll make your head spin. It's 5 a.m. and I'm kneeling in the mud on my dirt road, installing hidden spike strips beneath the gravel. The sound of Karen's BMW approaching cuts through the morning silence, her daily illegal shortcut about to become very expensive. As those headlights hit the exact spot where I've been waiting 6 months for this moment, I can't help but smile. But before I tell you how a soccer mom's entitlement cost her $50,000, let me ask, what would you do if someone kept trespassing on your property after you'd asked nicely 100 times? And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how many of you have dealt with entitled neighbors like this. My name's Jake Sullivan, and I'm a third-generation cattle rancher working 200 acres of Montana grassland that my grandfather homesteaded back in 1953. When my dad dropped dead of a heart attack at 58, I inherited more than just the land. I got a mountain of medical bills and cattle prices that hadn't been this low since the 90s. Every morning starts the same way. Coffee so strong it could strip paint, steam rising from my mug as it mingles with the familiar smell of cow manure drifting through the kitchen window. The crunch of my boots on frost-covered gravel echoes across the pasture as I head out for dawn feeding, a sound that's been part of the Sullivan routine for 70 years. This isn't just property, it's 3 generations of blood, sweat, and sheer stubbornness hammered into something real. That's when she showed up. Karen Whitmore, 52, wife of Richard Whitmore, who owns some big-shot development company. They'd just finished building Meadowbrook Estates, a collection of McMansions on what used to be the Peterson farm next door. Karen drove an $80,000 BMW X7 that somehow stayed spotless despite living in cattle country. Probably had it detailed twice a week. The first time she cut through my property, I figured it was an honest mistake. My dirt road does shave 12 minutes off the drive to town versus taking the paved county road that loops around. But when I walked over to explain it was private property, she looked at me like I'd crawled out from under a tractor. "It's just dirt," she said, examining her manicured nails. "Nobody's using it anyway." The purr of her German engine disrupted the peaceful morning air as she drove off, leaving deep tire ruts in the rain-softened earth. I stood there watching her taillights disappear, feeling my jaw muscles tighten. Should have been my first warning. Within a week, it became routine. Karen's daily shortcut turned into her friend's weekend convoy, luxury SUVs treating my working ranch like a scenic route. The cattle started getting spooked during feeding time, bunching up nervously whenever engines roared past. Milk production dropped 15% that first month. I tried the neighborly approach 3 more times. Each conversation got more condescending. "Look, I understand you're probably not used to sharing," she said during our final chat, "but this is America. Rural roads are public access, and I'm not changing my commute because you're uncomfortable with progress." That's when I put up proper, no trespassing signs. Big, obvious, legally compliant ones. The next morning, I found tire tracks going right around them. Karen had actually driven through my pasture grass to avoid acknowledging the signs. The texture of that moment, standing in my own field, staring at tire gouges through grass my grandfather had planted, that's when something shifted inside me. This wasn't about convenience anymore. This was about respect, and Karen Whitmore had just declared war on the wrong farmer. Karen's next move came exactly 1 week later. I'd installed a basic chain across the road with a heavy-duty lock. Nothing fancy, just a clear message that this was private property. Cost me $43 at Dutch's hardware store, seemed reasonable enough. I should have known better. Came back from town that afternoon to find the chain cut clean through, expensive Craftsman bolt cutters sitting mockingly on my front porch like a calling card. There was even a handwritten note tucked under the handle. "Rural roads are public access. Check your facts before harassing residents." The smell of diesel exhaust still hung in the air from her afternoon drive-by, mixing with the earthy scent of recent rain on dirt. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up those bolt cutters. Probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. The audacity of leaving them there like some kind of trophy was what really got to me. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with just an entitled neighbor. This was someone with money, lawyers, and zero respect for property rights. Time to fight smart instead of hard. Spent the next 3 days at the county courthouse, digging through dusty property records and easement laws. The musty smell of old paperwork and bureaucratic air conditioning became my new perfume as I learned everything I could about adverse possession. What I discovered in those Montana statutes made my stomach drop. If someone uses your land openly and continuously for 5 years, they can actually file to legally claim ownership of it. The county clerk explained it to me plain as day. Document everything and challenge trespassing immediately, or you could literally lose your property. Started documenting every single violation. Every time Karen drove through, I took photos with my smartphone. Timestamps, license plates, weather conditions, property damage. Had to buy a composition notebook from Emma's school supplies to track it all. The routine became second nature. Morning coffee, cattle feeding, road inspection, documentation. Meanwhile, Karen launched her own campaign around town. Dutch at the hardware store pulled me aside during my weekly supply run, lowering his voice like he was sharing state secrets. "She's been in here 3 times this week," he said, scratching his gray beard. "Telling anyone who'll listen that you're some kind of backward farmer blocking emergency access routes. Says you're harassing working mothers just trying to get to their jobs." The local coffee shop owner, Betty Kowalski, mentioned similar complaints. Karen was positioning herself as the victim of an unreasonable hillbilly who didn't understand modern life. She'd even started bringing friends to witness my alleged harassment, meaning they'd all drive through together while I was doing morning chores, honking and waving like they owned the place. But I wasn't just sitting around feeling sorry for myself. Started asking questions about the Whitmore Development Group. Found out they'd been quietly inquiring about purchasing 3 other properties in our area for something called Phase 2 expansion. The pattern was becoming clear. They wanted to control more land, and my road was probably crucial to their plans. Then came Thursday morning when everything shifted. County Assessor Ralph Henderson showed up unannounced, clipboard in hand, and an apologetic expression on his weathered face. Said he needed to do routine property boundary verification. Seemed like odd timing, considering my property had been surveyed just 5 years ago when Dad died. "Someone's been asking questions about your exact property lines," Ralph explained, mopping sweat from his forehead. "Specifically where your road sits relative to county easements and potential public access rights." I asked who'd made the inquiry. Ralph hesitated, then showed me the paperwork. The request came from Whitmore Development Group, filed just 2 days after my chain-cutting incident. Suddenly everything clicked. Karen's daily trespassing wasn't just entitled convenience. This was strategic reconnaissance. They were testing whether I'd defend my property rights, probably assuming a financially struggling rancher wouldn't have the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. They'd just made their first major miscalculation. 2 weeks later, Karen escalated to legal warfare. A thick envelope arrived via certified mail, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Morrison, Walsh & Associates, some fancy law firm out of Helena with letterhead so expensive it probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The letter accused me of harassment and intimidation against Karen, claiming I was illegally blocking an established access route that had been used by the community for years. Complete fabrication, but it sounded official enough to scare most people. The kicker was their demand for a $5,000 resolution fee, plus permanent easement rights to my road. My coffee cup shattered against the kitchen floor as I read that last part, brown liquid spreading across the linoleum like spilled blood. Emma found me 20 minutes later, still standing there holding the letter, surrounded by ceramic shards. "Dad, you okay?" she asked, grabbing the broom. "Just getting educated about how bullies with money operate," I told her. Spent the next day at the courthouse again, this time digging into the original property deeds going back to the homestead era. The county clerk, Mrs. Patterson, had been working there for 30 years and knew where every document was filed. What she helped me find made me want to drive straight to Karen's house and wave those papers in her face. Turns out my road was built by my grandfather in 1953, funded entirely with Sullivan family money, constructed completely on Sullivan property. Every single inch of it belonged to us, going back 70 years. Even better, I discovered that Karen's precious development had required an environmental impact study before construction. Buried in page 43 of that report was a specific notation: no public road access available through adjacent agricultural properties. Her own husband's company had documented in legal filings that they couldn't use my road. Mrs. Patterson smiled when I showed her that section. Always check the actual surveyed property lines versus what people assume, she said, stamping my copies. You'd be amazed how many public roads are actually private property that folks have been using without permission. The irony tasted sweeter than Dutch's fresh apple pie. I made copies of everything, organized it in a 3-ring binder that would make a librarian proud. Property surveys don't lie, and these surveys showed exactly what belonged to whom. But Karen wasn't done playing games. She started timing her daily violations for maximum disruption, right during cattle feeding when I'd have my hands full, or when I was trying to repair equipment. The aggressive crunch of her tires on gravel became a sound I could recognize from half a mile away, like the warning rattle of a snake. Worse, she brought friends along for scenic tours of the area, treating my working ranch like some kind of rural theme park. Groups of luxury vehicles would parade through while I'm moving cattle, honking their horns and taking photos like tourists. The smell of expensive perfume and chemical air freshener would linger in the dust clouds they kicked up, a stark contrast to the honest scent of hay and manure that belonged there. My cattle started showing stress behaviors, bunching together nervously, reduced milk production, skittish behavior around the road area. These weren't just inconveniences anymore. They were affecting my livelihood in measurable ways. The coordinated pressure campaign began that same week. My liability insurance company sent a reassessment notice, claiming they'd received complaints about unsafe conditions on my property. Code enforcement showed up for a routine safety inspection of my cattle operation, first time they'd been out here in 15 years. The township planning office called to verify my agricultural exemption status. Every phone call, every unexpected visitor, every official letter had Karen's fingerprints all over it. She was systematically trying to make my life miserable while building a paper trail to support her claims. Then came the revelation that showed just how calculated this whole campaign really was. Eddie Martinez, who runs the local mechanic shop, pulled me aside after church on Sunday. His weathered face looked troubled as he glanced around to make sure nobody was listening. "That Whitmore woman was in my shop last week," he said quietly, asking real specific questions about accident liability when someone hits farm equipment on rural roads. Wanted to know about insurance claims, who pays for what, that sort of thing. The pieces clicked together like a rifle bolt sliding home. Karen wasn't just planning to steal my road through adverse possession. She was setting up a scenario where she could claim it was a public safety hazard, probably hoping someone would hit my tractor or cattle and give her grounds for a massive lawsuit. The woman was thinking 3 moves ahead while I was still trying to understand the rules of the game we were playing. Karen's next play was pure public relations warfare. A letter to the editor appeared in the county newspaper that Thursday, written with the kind of polished language that screamed, "Hired PR consultant." The headline read, "Local farmer blocking emergency access routes endangers community safety." She painted herself as a concerned citizen worried about ambulance response times, claiming my artificial barriers were forcing emergency vehicles to take dangerous detours. Complete nonsense, but it sounded reasonable enough to anyone who didn't know the facts. The letter included a photo of my road with dramatic captions about outdated rural infrastructure blocking modern development. By Friday, Karen had created a Facebook group called Rural Community Connectivity Initiative with 47 members from her development. They shared the newspaper article with comments about backward farmers and obstructionist attitudes toward progress. The posts multiplied like weeds, professional-looking graphics, statistics about rural development benefits, even a petition demanding county intervention. My daughter Emma showed me the posts on her phone, her face flushed with anger. "Dad, they're calling you names online." Mrs. Whitmore posted pictures of our road saying it's proof that farmers don't understand public safety. The smell of bacon grease from breakfast turned my stomach as I read those comments. These people didn't know me, had never set foot on my property, but they were perfectly willing to believe Karen's version of reality. Meanwhile, I was building my own network. Started connecting with neighboring ranchers who'd been dealing with similar pressure from development companies. Tom Bradley, who owns the spread 2 miles south, mentioned that Whitmore Development had approached him twice about selling his water rights. Sarah Chen from the organic farm east of town said they'd offered to buy her property for agricultural conservation, which sounded suspicious as hell. Dutch at the hardware store became my informal intelligence network, mentioning when people came in asking about property surveys, easement laws, or rural access improvement projects. Turned out 3 other landowners had received similar inquiries about their property boundaries in the past month. Tom's lawyer explained something crucial. When facing coordinated pressure from developers, Property owners can form informal alliances to share legal costs. Splitting attorney fees among multiple families makes the fight affordable instead of financially devastating. But Karen's sabotage was just getting started. Came home from the feed store one Tuesday evening to find my cattle gate standing wide open, 50 head of Angus wandering loose on the county road. The metallic clang of the gate latch echoed in the dusk air as I rushed to secure it, but the damage was done. Took 3 hours to round up every last cow while they lowed in confused protest, their hooves drumming against asphalt in the growing darkness. Deputy Sheriff Brad Morrison showed up just as I was herding the last stragglers back into the pasture. Morrison lives in Karen's development, probably heard about the livestock emergency from his neighbors before I even knew there was a problem. He handed me a citation for failure to maintain adequate livestock containment, complete with a $500 fine and mandatory court appearance. "Sorry, Jake," he said, not looking sorry at all. "Got multiple reports of cattle on the roadway. Could have caused a serious accident." The citation felt like sandpaper between my fingers as I read it. Someone had deliberately opened that gate, and we both knew it. But proving it was another matter entirely. My security cameras had suffered mysterious accidents that week. 2 got hit by thrown rocks, leaving spiderweb cracks across the lenses. Another was found dangling by its power cord, apparently struck by a random branch that fell on a calm, windless day. The pattern was too convenient to be coincidence. The pressure campaign expanded beyond my property. Emma started getting cold shoulders from kids at school whose parents lived in the development. My bank called to discuss updated risk assessments on my operating loan. The local veterinarian mentioned receiving questions about livestock management standards in our area. Someone was systematically questioning every aspect of my operation. Karen's media blitz reached its peak when she got interviewed on the local radio station about modernizing rural infrastructure. I listened to the whole thing while fixing fence posts, her voice smooth as silk as she talked about bringing reluctant agricultural communities into the 21st century. She never mentioned my name directly, but everyone knew exactly which obstructionist farmer she was discussing. That same week, Dutch delivered news that would change everything. He'd been helping clean out old Mrs. Henderson's estate sale, sorting through decades of accumulated paperwork, when he found a box of surveyor's notes from the 1950s. The musty smell of old paper filled his truck cab as he drove over to show me what he'd discovered. "Jake, you need to see this," he said, spreading yellow documents across my kitchen table. "Your grandfather was one smart cookie." The papers revealed something I'd never known. When Grandpa built that road in 1953, it wasn't just to connect our main property to the county road. He'd built it to access a second tract of Sullivan family land, 40 acres of prime pasture that we'd owned clear through the 1980s. Financial troubles after the farm crisis forced my father to sell that tract to the county for back taxes in 1987, but there was a detail in the sale documents that made my hands shake. We'd retained permanent vehicular access rights to that land even after the county purchase. That 40-acre tract was now part of the county nature preserve, and those retained access rights were legally documented, recorded, and worth approximately $200,000 in today's real estate market. More importantly, any development project that interfered with those access rights would need extensive county review and environmental impact assessments. Suddenly, Karen's trespassing wasn't just about my farm road anymore. If Whitmore Development was planning any construction near the preserve boundaries, my retained access rights could shut down their entire project. The hunter had just become the hunted, and Karen had no idea what was coming. That box of surveyor's notes Dutch found was like striking oil. Spent the weekend spread across my kitchen table, going through every yellow document with a magnifying glass, the smell of old paper and faded ink filling the room. Emma helped organize everything chronologically while we worked through pot after pot of coffee. The story that emerged was bigger than I'd imagined. My grandfather hadn't just built that road for our main property. He'd built it to access a second tract of Sullivan land, 40 acres of prime bottomland that we'd owned until 1987. During the farm crisis, my dad was forced to sell that tract to the county for $23,000 in back taxes. But here's what nobody remembered. The sale contract included a clause retaining perpetual vehicular access rights for agricultural and family use. Monday morning, I drove to the county attorney's office with my documents. Rebecca Martinez, the property rights lawyer Dutch recommended, knew exactly what we were looking at. "This is a gold mine, Jake," she said, spreading papers across the conference table. "These retained access rights are legally bulletproof. Any property owner who checks what previous owners kept in sale contracts often discovers valuable retained rights that survive ownership transfers." The county preserve land was now valued at over $500,000. My retained access rights represented significant legal interest in any future use decisions. But Rebecca's research into Whitmore development revealed something that made my stomach flip. They owed $2. $3 million in county impact fees, payments they'd been delaying while trying to secure additional land for expanded development. Richard Whitmore's company was leveraged to the hilt, betting everything on approval for a much larger project including resort facilities and RV parks. "They need your cooperation," Rebecca explained. "Without clear road access to the preserve area, their expansion plans don't work financially. Karen's been trying to bully you because they can't afford a legal fight that might reveal how precarious their situation is." The revelation hit like cold water. Karen's aggressive tactics weren't strength, they were desperation moves. Her husband's company was months from potential bankruptcy if they couldn't secure additional development approvals. Rebecca showed me county planning documents that made everything crystal clear. Whitmore Development had filed preliminary paperwork for a massive rural resort community that would triple their current project size. The proposed development included golf courses, luxury cabins, and an RV park, all requiring access through what they assumed was public road infrastructure. My road, my family's road we'd built and maintained for 70 years. "Here's the beautiful part," Rebecca said, grinning. "Your retained access rights give you legal standing to challenge any development that would increase traffic beyond agricultural and family use. You could potentially block their entire project or negotiate a settlement worth hundreds of thousands." I drove home in a daze. For months, I'd been thinking small, just protecting my property from one entitled neighbor. But I was sitting on legal rights that could determine our entire community's future. Karen had been testing my resolve, assuming I was too poor and ignorant to fight back effectively. What she didn't realize was that every tire track she left was building a case that would destroy her husband's development dreams. The phone rang that evening. Tom Bradley, the neighboring rancher, sounded worried. "Jake, you need to know something. Richard Whitmore just made me an offer I can't refuse for my water rights. Says he needs an answer by week's end, or the deal's off permanently." The pieces fell into place. Whitmore Development wasn't just pressuring me. They were systematically trying to control every resource needed for massive expansion. Water rights, road access, county approvals, all part of a coordinated plan worth tens of millions. And Karen's daily trespassing had just handed me the legal ammunition to blow it all up. Tuesday morning, I called Rebecca Martinez and told her we were going nuclear. Time for a strategy session that would make the Normandy invasion look like a church picnic. She arrived at my kitchen table with a briefcase full of legal firepower and the kind of predatory smile that made me glad she was on my side. "Karen Whitmore just made the biggest mistake of her entitled life," Rebecca said, spreading documents across the worn Formica surface. "She's been building our case for us, one tire track at a time. Every single trespassing incident gives us more ammunition." We mapped out a four-pronged attack strategy over coffee and Emma's leftover birthday cake. The sweet smell of chocolate frosting mixed with the serious business of legal warfare felt surreal, but this was war, fought with paperwork instead of bullets. First prong, criminal prosecution. 6 months of documented trespassing with photos, timestamps, and witness statements created an airtight criminal case. Each violation carried fines up to $1,000, and Karen's group had racked up dozens of incidents. Do the math, this wasn't pocket change anymore. Second prong, assert my retained access rights to the county preserve. This would trigger mandatory environmental impact reviews for any development project affecting the area. Rebecca explained that property owners can leverage retained rights to force comprehensive review of nearby development projects, often revealing regulatory violations or environmental concerns. Third prong, coordinate with neighboring landowners for unified resistance. Tom Bradley, Sarah Chen, and 4 other local property owners agreed to pool resources for shared legal representation. When developers pressure multiple landowners simultaneously, organized resistance often exposes the coordinated nature of their tactics. Fourth prong, the spike strip trap. Perfectly legal property protection with maximum psychological impact, designed to create a public confrontation that would expose Karen's true character to the entire community. Dutch's hardware store became our unofficial headquarters. That Wednesday afternoon, his back office looked like a campaign war room. Maps of property boundaries, copies of legal documents, and a timeline of every Whitmore development transgression we could document. The smell of machine oil and metal filings from his shop floor drifted through the doorway as we planned our counterattack. These development companies rely on intimidating, isolated landowners, Dutch said, adjusting his glasses as he studied our property maps. But when neighbors work together and share information, their whole strategy falls apart. Sarah Chen brought valuable intelligence from her organic farming network. Turns out Whitmore Development had similar conflicts in 3 other Montana counties, always using the same playbook. Identify struggling rural landowners, pressure them individually, then use legal intimidation to force compliance. But they'd never faced organized resistance before. Tom Bradley's contribution was pure gold. His cousin worked for the state environmental agency and confirmed that any development affecting preserve access would require extensive review. The process typically took 18 to 24 months and cost developers hundreds of thousands in consulting fees. While Rebecca handled the legal preparation, I focused on the technical side. Researched retractable spike strip systems used by private security companies, learning that pneumatic systems could be legally deployed on private property with proper warning signage. The key was positioning them for maximum impact while maintaining legal compliance. Emma became our social media coordinator, documenting everything for her growing follower base of young people interested in rural heritage preservation. Her posts about family farming traditions were getting thousands of shares, building public support we'd need for the confrontation ahead. The spike strip installation required careful planning. Had to create a collapsible housing system that would deploy from below the road surface, invisible until activated. Spent 2 evenings with Dutch figuring out the pneumatic controls, testing everything with remote activation from my smartphone. Warning signs posed an interesting challenge. Legally required, but couldn't be so obvious they'd tip off Karen before the trap was ready. We positioned them for technical compliance while maintaining the element of surprise. Small print on posts she'd been ignoring for months anyway. Rebecca filed preliminary injunction paperwork but held it in reserve. The strategy was letting Karen think she was winning while we built an airtight case. Every day she didn't know about our discovery of the retained access rights was another day she'd continue trespassing and strengthening our position. The community mobilization exceeded my wildest expectations. Local 4-H groups offered to help document traditional farming practices. The County Historical Society wanted to create educational materials about homestead-era property rights. Even the newspaper editor, initially skeptical, became interested after learning about the broader pattern of development pressure. By Friday, everything was in place. Security cameras repositioned for optimal coverage, spike strip system tested and ready, legal documentation organized for maximum impact. The county commissioner agreed to make a routine property inspection visit the following Saturday morning. Karen had no idea she was about to drive into the most expensive 12 minutes of her life. The trap was set, and this time, the mouse had built a better mousetrap. Karen's desperation became obvious that Thursday when she showed up at my door with a briefcase and the kind of fake smile politicians use during election season. Through the screen door, I could see her BMW idling in my driveway, engine running like she expected this to be a quick transaction. "Jake, I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I'd like to make this right." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a cashier's check for $25,000, holding it up like a peace offering. The numbers looked real enough, printed on fancy bank paper that rustled in the morning breeze. "This is for a permanent access easement," she explained. "Clean slate, no hard feelings, everybody wins." My security cameras were recording every word as I stood there looking at more money than I'd seen in years. Emma watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression mixing curiosity with disgust at the obvious bribery attempt. "That's a generous offer, Karen," I said carefully, "but I'm not interested in selling access rights." Her fake smile cracked around the edges. "Jake, be reasonable. This is more money than you'll see from cattle sales all year. Take the deal and we can put this unpleasantness behind us." When I shook my head, her mask slipped completely. The polite neighbor act evaporated, replaced by the entitled rage I'd seen glimpses of before. "You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice rising to that shrill pitch that made my teeth itch. "My husband has connections throughout this county. We can make your life very difficult if you insist on being unreasonable." I kept my expression neutral while my phone recorded every threatening word. "Is that some kind of threat, Karen?" "It's reality," she snapped, stuffing the check back into her briefcase. "You think you can fight people like us? We'll bury you in legal fees and regulatory problems until you're begging to take whatever scraps we offer." After she peeled out of my driveway, the harassment escalated to levels that would have impressed a mob boss. County health inspector showed up Tuesday morning for a complaint-based livestock inspection, claiming anonymous reports of unsanitary conditions. Took him 3 hours to admit my operation was cleaner than most commercial facilities. Wednesday brought a state agriculture department representative demanding to see my business licenses, triggered by concerns about commercial farming without proper permits. The bureaucrat seemed disappointed when I produced every required document, all current and properly filed. Thursday's surprise was an IRS audit notice, the kind of thick envelope that makes your blood pressure spike just looking at the return address. The timing was too convenient to be coincidence. Someone with connections had made phone calls. Emma's school guidance counselor called Friday afternoon about concerning reports regarding her home environment. When I pressed for details, she admitted the complaint was anonymous but mentioned inappropriate exposure to adult business conflicts. The pattern was crystal clear. Karen and her husband were using their connections to weaponize every government agency they could reach. Each harassment required time and energy to resolve, designed to exhaust my resources and force capitulation. But I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Rebecca Martinez was documenting every retaliatory action with dates, times, and witness statements. Each harassment attempt strengthened our case that Whitmore Development was conducting a coordinated intimidation campaign. Dutch's business faced similar pressure. Zoning compliance inspector arrived unannounced, claiming concerns about commercial storage in residential areas. Dutch had been running his hardware store from the same location for 30 years without problems, but suddenly his inventory organization needed comprehensive review. The local newspaper received an anonymous letter claiming I was an anti-development extremist trying to block economic progress. The editor called to verify facts before printing anything, but the attempt to poison public opinion was obvious. Insurance company demanded additional property inspection, citing changed risk factors in agricultural operations. My premiums would likely increase regardless of inspection results, adding financial pressure to the legal costs I was already facing. Sarah Chen got hit with environmental compliance questions about her organic farming practices. Tom Bradley received water usage verification requests that required expensive testing and documentation. The coordinated nature of these attacks proved we were dealing with professional intimidation tactics. Karen hired a private investigator. I spotted the same rental car parked at different locations around my property 3 days running. The PI was photographing my daily routine, probably looking for violations he could report to various agencies. The level of surveillance felt invasive and threatening, exactly the psychological pressure they were aiming for. Rebecca revealed this escalation pattern often indicated serious financial desperation. When developers resort to harassment campaigns this aggressive, they're usually months away from bankruptcy. They're betting everything on breaking your resistance before their financial situation becomes public knowledge. The irony was delicious. While Karen thought she was wearing me down with bureaucratic torture, every harassment attempt created more evidence for our civil rights lawsuit. She was building our case stronger with each desperate move. Time to spring the trap. The county planning meeting was scheduled for the third Thursday of the month, and Karen pulled out every stop to make it her moment of triumph. She hired a professional presentation team from Helena, complete with traffic flow charts, economic impact projections, and glossy brochures promoting responsible rural development. The meeting hall reeked of her expensive perfume, mixed with the musty smell of old wood and decades of public discourse. Karen positioned herself as the voice of progress, arguing for rural access improvement initiatives that would benefit the entire community. Her PowerPoint presentation included before and after photos of rural roads in other states, statistics about economic development, and testimonials from satisfied residents of similar projects. "We have an opportunity to bring our community into the 21st century," she announced to the packed room, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. But outdated attitudes and artificial barriers are preventing the kind of growth that creates jobs and increases property values for everyone. She brought supporters from the State Development Association, real estate professionals who spoke eloquently about smart growth and sustainable development. Their coordinated presentations made it clear this wasn't amateur hour. Karen had invested serious money in this public relations blitz. Local radio gave her a softball interview about modernizing rural infrastructure. I listened while repairing fence posts, grinding my teeth as she painted herself as a misunderstood visionary fighting against backward farmers who don't understand modern economics. Her Facebook campaign reached new levels of sophistication, with professionally produced videos showing happy families enjoying thoughtfully planned communities in other rural areas. The comment sections filled with supporters praising her vision and criticizing obstructionist attitudes that prevented progress. Meanwhile, my spike strip system sat ready beneath the road surface, tested and calibrated for maximum impact. All documentation was organized for the confrontation ahead, security cameras positioned to capture every moment of the upcoming showdown. Karen's confidence peaked when she announced plans for a community education drive the following Saturday. She'd bring a caravan of development residents to demonstrate the practical necessity of rural road access, documenting my harassment when I objected to their group trespassing. The local 4-H club had already scheduled their traditional farming education tour for that same Saturday morning. Perfect timing for maximum witnesses. Dutch arranged for County Commissioner Williams to make his routine property inspection visit, and the newspaper photographer was tipped off about the development dispute story unfolding. Karen's fatal overconfidence showed when she posted her plans on social media. "Time to settle this access issue once and for all," she wrote. "Some people need to learn that progress benefits everyone, whether they like it or not." She planned to arrive with 8 vehicles during peak educational activity, establishing precedent for community access while documenting my unreasonable behavior for legal proceedings. Her supporters would witness my harassment tactics firsthand, providing testimony for future court cases. What Karen didn't realize was that she was walking directly into a perfectly legal property protection trap. Every detail had been planned with Rebecca's legal guidance. Warning signs properly posted, activation system documented, witness coordination carefully arranged. Richard Whitmore's financial pressure was becoming visible. Tom Bradley mentioned seeing bank representatives at the development office twice that week. Sarah Chen heard rumors about delayed contractor payments and nervous investors asking questions about project timelines. The $2.3 million impact fee payment deadline was approaching fast, and Whitmore Development needed their expansion approved immediately to avoid bankruptcy. Karen's aggressive timeline wasn't just about convenience anymore. It was about financial survival. Rebecca filed surprise discovery motions examining all county development permits, forcing Whitmore to disclose their true financial situation. The legal pressure was mounting from multiple directions while Karen remained focused on her Saturday publicity stunt. County Attorney Morrison privately advised that I had an overwhelming criminal trespass case, with documentation that would satisfy any judge in the state. 6 months of evidence created prosecutorial certainty that rarely existed in property disputes. My property rights coalition now included state-level political connections through Tom's family ties. Emma's social media campaign had attracted attention from rural advocacy groups across Montana. The story was bigger than our local dispute. It represented a broader struggle between development pressure and agricultural heritage. Friday evening, everything was in position. Security cameras checked and positioned, spike strip system armed and ready, legal documents organized for maximum impact presentation. The 4-H kids were excited about their educational tour, completely unaware they'd witnessed the most expensive trespassing incident in county history. Karen posted her final social media update that night. "Tomorrow we make history. Time to show that community progress can't be stopped by one stubborn farmer's outdated attitudes." She had no idea how right she was about making history. Tomorrow would indeed be remembered for years, just not the way she expected. The trap was set, the witnesses were coming, and Karen Whitmore was about to drive straight into the most expensive 12 minutes of her entitled life. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear, with that perfect Montana autumn air that makes everything feel possible. The 4-H kids started arriving at 8:30 for their traditional farming education tour, excited voices mixing with the lowing of cattle as I led them through morning feeding routines. 15 teenagers learning about agricultural heritage, their parents scattered around taking photos of genuine ranch life. County Commissioner Williams showed up right on schedule at 9 for his routine property inspection, clipboard in hand and that official government expression that said he was here on serious business. Local newspaper photographer Jenny Martinez positioned herself strategically to capture the rural heritage education story, her camera loaded and ready. Dutch and 3 neighboring ranchers attended as community support, forming a semicircle of witnesses that would make any prosecutor happy. Tom Bradley brought his teenage son, adding another layer of family authenticity to the morning's activities. That's when we heard them coming. The rumble of multiple luxury engines cut through the peaceful morning air like chainsaws through silk. Karen's caravan approached at exactly 9:15, 8 vehicles strong, led by her pristine BMW X7 gleaming in the morning sunlight. Behind her followed a parade of Mercedes SUVs, Audi crossovers, and one massive Cadillac Escalade that probably cost more than my annual cattle income. She'd brought the full force of Meadowbrook Estates to witness her moment of triumph. Karen climbed out of her BMW, wearing what looked like a safari outfit, khaki everything, designer boots that had never seen actual dirt, and oversized sunglasses that screamed, "I'm very important." And she surveyed my property like a general planning a battlefield assault. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to her caravan in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "today we're going to demonstrate the practical necessity of rural road access. This gentleman has been preventing community members from using established transportation routes." Commissioner Williams stepped forward, his weathered face showing the kind of patience that comes from 30 years of dealing with entitled newcomers. "Ma'am, this is private property. You don't have permission to be here." Karen's laugh could have stripped paint. "Commissioner, surely you understand that rural roads serve community needs. This farmer can't simply block access because he's uncomfortable with progress." That's when I pulled out my smartphone and activated the spike strip system. The pneumatic hiss was barely audible, but I felt the satisfying click as the retractable spikes locked into position 2 inches below the road surface. Hidden beneath loose gravel, invisible until it was too late, my perfectly legal property protection system was armed and ready. "You know what, Karen?" I said, loud enough for every camera and witness to hear clearly. "You're absolutely right. Let's settle this access issue once and for all. Feel free to demonstrate that community access you keep talking about." Her smile was pure predatory satisfaction. "Thank you for finally seeing reason, Jake." She climbed back into her BMW, revved the engine dramatically, and led her caravan onto my private road with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for her actions. The sound of luxury vehicles accelerating over gravel filled the morning air as 8 expensive automobiles drove directly into my trap. Pop, 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 pop. The systematic puncturing of 32 tires sounded like firecrackers going off in sequence. Karen's BMW lurched to a stop first, followed by the confused cursing of her supporters as their vehicles sagged onto deflated rubber. The smell of released air and expensive automotive fluids began mixing with the honest scent of hay and cattle manure. Karen's rage explosion was immediate and spectacular. She erupted from her disabled BMW like Mount Vesuvius, screaming profanities that would have made a sailor blush. Her designer safari outfit was already collecting dust as she stomped around her ruined vehicle, waving her arms and demanding justice from anyone wearing a uniform. "This is criminal sabotage," she shrieked at Commissioner Williams. "Arrest this man immediately. He's destroyed private property and endangered public safety." Commissioner Williams remained absolutely calm, consulting his clipboard with bureaucratic precision. "Ma'am, property owners have the legal right to protect their land from trespassers. You've just committed criminal trespass in front of 23 witnesses." That's when I produced my masterpiece. 6 months of documentation in a thick 3-ring binder. Photos, timestamps, property surveys, legal documents, and video evidence of repeated trespassing despite clear warning signs. Jenny Martinez's camera captured every moment of Karen's meltdown as she realized the trap she'd walked into. The 4-H kids watched in fascination as an entitled adult threw the kind of tantrum they'd outgrown by age 5. "You can't do this to me!" Karen screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Do you know who my husband is? We have rights! This is America!" "You're absolutely right," I replied, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet morning air. "This is America, where property owners can protect their land from people who think money makes them above the law." The reckoning had finally arrived. The aftermath hit faster than Karen's deflated ego. County Attorney Morrison arrived within the hour, took one look at my documentation, and started writing citations. 8 counts of criminal trespass, $1,000 fine each, plus $3,200 in tire replacement costs that insurance wouldn't cover because the damage occurred during intentional illegal activity. Karen's courtroom meltdown 3 weeks later became local legend. She demanded to speak to the judge's supervisor, claimed discrimination against successful business people, and accused me of rural terrorism. The judge, a fourth-generation Montanan who'd grown up on a ranch, was not impressed. Full restitution ordered, plus court costs. Richard Whitmore's development empire collapsed like a house of cards. The $2.3 million impact fee payment came due the Monday after Karen's spike strip disaster, but their financing had evaporated overnight. Turns out, investors don't appreciate seeing their project leaders arrested for criminal trespassing on the evening news. Rebecca Martinez turned my documentation into a civil lawsuit that settled for $47,000, enough to pay off Dad's medical bills, upgrade my equipment, and establish the Sullivan Agricultural Heritage Scholarship Fund. The irony of Karen's harassment money funding agricultural education for local kids was sweeter than honey straight from the comb. The County Planning Commission unanimously rejected Whitmore's expansion proposal after learning about the criminal convictions and financial irregularities. Commissioner Williams noted that developers who can't respect existing property rights probably shouldn't be trusted with larger projects. My retained access rights to the nature preserve became the foundation for something beautiful. Partnering with the county, we created educational access for school groups and families wanting to learn about traditional farming and conservation. The Sullivan Heritage Trail now welcomes thousands of visitors annually, generating tourism income while preserving agricultural history. Dutch's hardware store became unofficial headquarters for our Permanent Property Owners Coalition. 7 families now share legal resources and information, making us too expensive for developers to pressure individually. 3 similar victories followed in neighboring counties as word spread about our successful resistance. Emma's social media documentation of our fight went viral, inspiring young people across rural America to value their farming heritage. Her college plans now include agricultural law, inspired by watching legal preparation triumph over bullying and intimidation. She jokes about becoming the next Rebecca Martinez, protecting family farms from entitled developers. The community benefits keep expanding. Our annual Farm Heritage Festival attracts visitors from across the state, celebrating traditional agriculture while educating urban folks about where their food actually comes from. Local restaurants feature heritage beef from participating ranches, creating market premiums that help struggling family operations. Karen and Richard moved to Colorado after their bankruptcy proceedings concluded, leaving behind a half-finished development and some very expensive life lessons. The McMansions they did complete sit mostly empty, too expensive for local families and too isolated for most city transplants. Local contractors who got stiffed by Whitmore Development formed their own coalition, sharing information about problematic clients and protecting each other from similar situations. The ripple effects of standing up to bullies extend far beyond my little dirt road. Medical bills finally paid off, cattle operation running smoothly, and that daily sound of Karen's engine no longer disrupting peaceful mornings. Life returned to the rhythm that 3 generations of Sullivans had known. Coffee steam mixing with morning air, boots crunching on frost-covered gravel, cattle lowing contentedly as they gather for feeding time. Rebecca Martinez keeps my case files as examples for other rural property disputes. She says the combination of thorough documentation, community organization, and legal preparation created a template that other families can follow when facing similar pressure. The Scholarship Fund has helped 15 local kids pursue agricultural education over the past 5 years. Several returned to expand family operations. Others became agricultural advocates in state government. Emma says, watching young people choose farming careers feels like the best revenge against those who called us backward. Sometimes the best outcome isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something positive from their mistakes. If you've got your own HOA horror story or entitled neighbor nightmare, drop it in the comments below. The craziest one might become my next video, and trust me, the stories you've shared are wilder than anything Hollywood could dream up. And make sure to hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started. Next week, I'm telling you about the solar farm developer who tried to claim agricultural exemption while blocking my cattle's water access. Spoiler alert, it didn't end well for them either.